So yeah, I think thank you so much for that introduction, because you summarized regenerative food forests so well. I feel like I don't even need to talk anymore. Um, but I guess this talk is maybe a little bit more about my passion project than it is what regenerative food forests are. Um, and I guess my passion project started with me contemplating this question quite deeply, which is, why do we need to change our food systems? I first started contemplating this question in 2020. I guess, anyone says the year 2020, and of course, people think COVID. And of course, what else could make us contemplate our food systems more than the COVID pandemic? It brought food crisis, food security, food sovereignty into almost everyday language, whereas before I felt like it wasn't really top of mind so much. But for me in particular, my health kind of brought this question to the forefront of my contemplation. I was diagnosed with cancer a couple of days before the hard lockdowns. And, that was, you weren't allowed to leave your house, never mind go to hospitals and get treatments and go to doctors and do things that I guess for a cancer patient undergoing chemo would usually require community and support. And all of a sudden it was a lot of isolation. And a lot of fear, not just for myself and my own disease, but just the disease that was spreading around the world, which I guess you try and control or try and get into control when you feel so out of control. And one of the things I felt I could maybe control was at least what I was putting in my body, and the health I was bringing myself. And I went on a hunt. Well, firstly, I went on a big, long journey to learn about my own health and what is important to health, but also just to find organic fruit and veg, something that hasn't been grown in a whole bunch of pesticides and with a whole bunch of fertilizers, and meat products that haven't been pumped full of estrogen and different, I guess, hormones, milks and cheeses that actually were good for my body and not bad for my body. Now, obviously, trying to do this during COVID, maybe, leveled up that difficulty a little bit. But I realized that it was actually really hard to find healthy food. We all assume the food we're putting in our body is healthy, but a lot of the time it's not. So I contemplated this question even more deeply. And I actually found a great mini YouTube clip done by the United Nations that I'll share in the chat after this. And they actually, in a very short and succinct way, talk about the limitations of our food systems. And I mean, just highlight some of the atrocities that are caused by our food systems. Like, on the one hand, we've got about 8 million people that are starving every day, that are going hungry, that do not have access. There's 2 billion people across the world right now that do not have access to sufficient vitamins and minerals. But then on the other hand, we've got 1.6 billion people that are overeating, and 600 million of those people are obese, and you just look at that and you think, this world is out of balance. I love that this is following on that balance conference, because really the world is out of balance at the moment. Some of the other things they highlight is that our food sources are 75 less diverse than what we need for our health. We have now gone down to being dependent on about 12 vegetable species, and 5 animal species that contain our entire diet. The bulk of that being rice, wheat, and corn, which have very little nutrient value for us. They also talk about the environmental impact that our food system has, with all of the pesticides and all of the chemicals going into our water sources, but also just the rapid degrading of our soils. I think they, on that video, specifically call out that 33%, that's a third of our world's soils, have been degraded to the degree that it can no longer support agriculture. And you just think, that's a third of our world that literally can't feed us anymore. So the steep contemplation of this question, why we need to change our food system, I guess led me to the discovery of regenerative food systems, looking at ways where us as humans work along with the planet, work along with our food sources, and really does create or reconnect us to our food. my husband and I started, so I loved your, I guess your example there, Katika, of the person you met in Cuba who just started planting things in their back garden. That's what we did. Just went to the grocery store, you know, okay, well, we bought a pepper, let's dry the seeds and let's plant some peppers. You know, we then went on to planting trees, which is actually way easier than looking after vegetables. So we went into using perennials and using trees, and planting a mini food forest in our own garden. Now, of course, trees take a long time to feed you, 7 years before they start giving you fruit. So looking at this entropic way of planting, and we became so much, my husband and I became so much more connected to our food and to our health that even with the diagnosis, I have never been healthier in my body and in my soul. So I'm not gonna, I guess, touch on regenerative food systems holistically, but I also found 2 really cute mini videos that talk about them so beautifully. And I know there are so many on this call that know so much more about permaculture and regenerative food systems than me. I feel like I'm just dipping my toe a little bit at the moment. But I've really enjoyed learning about them. And I guess for me, what underpins all of them is we need access to good water and good soil. And Katika, I think you also in your talk said, you know, the kind of water and soil we have is so important. And I didn't realize that before until I kind of set off on my adventure to, now I've planted the food forest in my little garden. Where else can I go and do this? So I guess my journey led me to joining my local Rotary Club, and literally I just walked into the first meeting and said, I want to plant a food forest somewhere, you know, how can I go about doing this? Of course, there wasn't an opportunity for me to just do that off the bat. So I joined some other projects, which led me to a wonderful school. I first met the principal at a conference and I said, I want to plant a food forest. And she was like, great, my school has got no greenery. It's, you know, it really, really needs some love. A lot of our school children are dependent on our feeding scheme, which means they get really 1 carb and 1 protein a day. They get no other food at home. You know, so to bring some fruit and vegetables and things into the diet would be great. You know, come and plant your food forest at my school. So her and I set off to think about some aims of what a food forest at a school could do. There is a feeding scheme already, I guess, in place for here in South Africa, in partnership with the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Forestry. And they do plant, I guess, vegetable gardens and sponsor 1 gardener per school to try and get vegetables into the food that they provide. So government provides millipap or sump, which is, I guess, a carb. And then they provide 1 protein, 2 proteins a week. So 1 is a bean and 1 is chicken livers. And that's really the diet that a lot of our population has to live on. And they don't get other food, I guess, integrated into that. So I guess the first aim was to bring a little bit more nutrition into the school children's diet and to support the feeding scheme. The school has 1,500 children in it. It is a container school. So what that means, it's in little prefab I guess, classrooms. There's no brick and mortar. They do have running water, luckily, and do have access to electricity. But in fact, in the surrounding community, they're the only ones that have that. So that leads to theft because the community is trying to access the water and electricity. Bringing in medicinal and traditional indigenous knowledge into the system. I mean, a lot of the African culture is still so connected to that indigenous knowledge that you can use mpepu, or you can use cancer bush, or you can use artemisia. And these are things that can help with your flus. These are things that can prevent cancers. These are things, and they just can grow in your garden, and you can eat them in your food. And you can have access to medicine in your own homes. Of course, education in environmental awareness and stewardship. So just bringing some greenery into the school. These are our community leaders in the future. You know, how can we expect them to bring forward a green planet if they don't have any green that surrounds them? So really bringing in education and environmental awareness. creating employment and economic incentives. So bringing the gardeners in, bringing the community members in and saying, here's a piece of land, you know, if you look after it and you grow food from it, you benefit from it. You know, we've, in one of the schools that I'm working with, we've partnered with a local organic market, and any food that the gardeners grow on the school premises, they get to sell 50% of that for an income for themselves. So we've been creating agri-entrepreneurs, and it's volunteers that have literally come into the school from the surrounding community and said, what are you doing? You know, and we've helped now turn them into agri-entrepreneurs. We've been really trying to build the relationships with the government, the Department of Forestry, the Department of Agriculture, as well as the Western Cape Education Department, and trying to influence their nutrition program to bring more and more true nutrition into the diets, as well as environmental awareness. And then, of course, just building supportive regenerative ecosystems. So how I've been funding this at the moment is going to corporates and saying, hey, you want to come do a fun corporate day? Come with me and let's go plant some trees at a school. Give me some money. And we have been taking corporates into these townships, into these schools, and saying, come plant some trees with me. And they have absolutely loved it. But that has also led to the corporates seeing the needs of the school and saying, I see you need an upgrade to your IT department. You know, we've got some old computers we can donate. Or, you know, I see you need new paint over here. You know, maybe our next day can be coming and painting the school. So it's just building that supportive community. And then, of course, I guess the biggest, because I don't really know much about permaculture or planting food forests, it's creating that forest ecosystem. So this is Dunoon. I guess the little blocks, white blocks there next to the big, I guess, gray blocks, that's the school. That's the container school. Everything that surrounds there are, I guess, in South Africa, we say shacks. And really what that is it's households of people that are living in these informal areas. And literally what they are corrugated iron walls and a corrugated iron roof, probably smaller than a room in a conventional house, and often that houses 8 to 10 people. There's no access to electricity, there's no access to water, so you'll just see electricity wires all over the place because it's people stealing, taking electricity from the schools who actually allow it because people need electricity. You know, when we were digging the holes, you know, we had the school kind of map out where all the water lines were, so we didn't hit any water lines. 4 times we hit water lines, and I was like, how can this be? We mapped the water lines. But it was because community had come in and had dug holes underneath and was stealing water from the school, and had buried the pipes. So we had uncovered these pipes through our digging, because the community just doesn't have access. So I met Mama Temba, you know, I said, yes, let's go plant a food forest. And then I got to her school in the middle of Dunoon and I saw the challenge we were facing, the soil we were facing, the lack of space we were facing. And I guess I just had to remind myself, as with we did in our back garden, that when you are designing in these permaculture kind of ways, when you're working with nature, you're not just designing the space, but you're designing in space and time. And that we can just take a small step now and we can plant a couple of trees and we can come back and we can plant the next layer, which is going to be the supportive root layer or the ground cover layer. And we can then start planting the vines that is going to provide a little bit more shade. And we can plant the pioneer trees that are going to be our windbreaks. And we can just build on this little steps by little steps. And focus on succession, because succession describes how communities develop over time.
What a powerful message, if I may just say, Michelle, because this step-by-step approach, and you have this wonderful video as well that you want to share with us. So I would encourage you to maybe show us also how actually everything looks like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And I guess we started with knowing that the foundation of this is going to be soil and water. And wow, did we run into issues of soil and water. From a water perspective, one of the agri-entrepreneurs I'm working with, you know, have a tunnel, have this beautiful space, really started getting going, had a borehole dug, had to send the water away, obviously, for testing, and it came back with really high E. coli levels, to the degree that it actually can't be used on the food crops. And there is no access to potable water, you know, that is their only water source. And it is just so high in E. coli, and it's now preventing them from actually being able to move forward because they can't afford the infrastructure to be able to filter the water to be able to use it. And one of the other schools, like I mentioned, you know, the community is stealing the water from the schools, you know, by digging these underground pipes to be able to access water just because they don't have access to water, you know. At one of the other schools, because it's the Cape Flats, which used to be, I guess, sea that's now receded, the water content and the soil content is very, very salty. So as we dig down to get the water, it's just salty water. Soil also, you know, depending on the different areas you've been working with, either it's so sandy that, you know, it doesn't hold any of the nutrients, it doesn't hold any of the water, it just runs through, or it's so clayey that, you know, the water just sits and it actually can't spread across. So we, you know, have had so many, I guess, issues with the soil and water, but that's led to innovation. It's led to us learning how to use, you know, drain pipes that you can sink into the water, that it holds the water a little bit before so the trees can access it. It's taught us to use mulch and mulch and mulch and mulch to build the soils back up. It's taught us to create a circular economy and bring the compost that the children and that the kitchens are using and feed the soils back. So this is a little bit of the zoomed in picture of the video I'm about to show you. So this is the school. I guess those white blocks are the prefabs or the classrooms. As you can see, there's no, I guess, brick or water. It really is just prefabs. So on the one side over here, we called it the teacher's chill area or the therapy garden. We did a citrus orchard. We did lavenders. We did herbs. We did indigenous flowers. And it's a beautiful walk for the teachers now. On the other side of the school, we did, in the grade R area, deciduous fruit forest. So that is so that the young children can see the changes in seasons. They can see as the, you know, they get the flowers and then the fruits and then the leaves and then they lose their leaves. And that becomes food for the soil. So it really is helping the young children connect back to the food sources that we have. And then a grade R reading corner with shade and indigenous trees, etc.
These are such a beautiful messages, Michelle, but I will have to ask you to wrap it up because the time.
I'm done. Do I have 2 minutes for my video?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay,
We will
perfect.
watch the video as well. Fantastic presentation of actions on the ground, and really inspiring to show how one person's personal motivation can bring the change in the entire community and then even get the attention of the state and corporate world. Thank you very much. Please, let's finish with your video.
I hope it plays with sound.